I got into the top magnet high school in the state with the highest score in the city, only to have a teacher frame me for cheating. So I hunkered down and started getting a 0 on every single test. Later, when the college entrance exam scores came out, the admissions offices from Harvard and MIT blew up my phone. This year's top scorer in humanities already chose Harvard. How about you, the top scorer in sciences? Come join her. You two can keep each other company. I put on a regretful face. Sorry, Harvard didn't offer me a scholarship, so I think I'll go with MIT. The Harvard admissions team looked like they'd just swallowed a bug. Meanwhile, the guy from MIT busted out a celebratory TikTok dance on the spot. The moment I walked into my new classroom, I received a warm welcome. Look, that's Leo. He got caught cheating on the final last semester. The proctor caught him red-handed. Someone looked confused. But didn't he get the highest score in the city to get in here? Another person shot back with a know-it-all look. His dad is the superintendent of schools. I heard that during the placement exam, they purposely seated the kids with the second and third highest scores right behind and next to him. Get the picture? Those last 3 words were loaded with insinuation. I scoffed. Spreading rumors really costs nothing, does it? It was one thing to drag my name through the mud, but now they were dragging my old man into it. But then I remembered the massive slap across my face outside the exam room that day, and the furious roar that followed. Why did you cheat? I never told you that you had to be number 1. You've completely disgraced me. Even my own father didn't believe me. I had nothing left to prove. If they were going to fail me for cheating, then I might as well keep failing. If I wasn't going to be happy, no one was. The whispers around me continued. See, the second he can't cheat, he gets dropped from the A track right into a regular class with us. What a piece of trash. Ugh. Before, I was number 1 in the city. I was a god. Now, I was the fallen cheater who'd been knocked off his pedestal, and everyone wanted to kick me while I was down. No one remembered the city-wide celebration when Northwood High managed to recruit me over our rival school. It's always like this. The higher they build you up, the harder you fall. I walked down the aisle, my face a mask of indifference. I paused next to the buzz-cut kid who'd been talking the loudest, my eyes meeting the smug sneer he hadn't had time to wipe off his face. Seeing me stop, he tensed up for a second before his arrogance returned. Yo, what's up? The cheater's got an attitude now? You gonna hit me or something? Honestly, I was getting a little pissed, until my eyes fell on the test paper on his desk, which he was only halfway through. It was a relatively simple algebra problem, and the answer box was filled with his sprawling calculations. The final result was an equation that would make Einstein roll in his grave. 4 is equal to 5. Wow. This guy had somehow managed to make the variable x completely disappear. Suddenly, all my anger just evaporated. With an IQ like that, he wasn't even worth my time. I brushed past him and walked straight to an empty seat in the last row. Behind me, his triumphant voice rang out. See? I told you he had a guilty conscience. I smirked. With a brain like his, running his mouth was probably the only thing he was good at. I was the only one in the back row. The seat next to me was empty. I shoved my backpack into the desk and tried to get some sleep. The clacking of high heels announced the arrival of a serious-looking woman wearing gold-rimmed glasses. I'm your homeroom advisor and math teacher, Ms. Evans. We'll have our class meeting later. First, I'm handing back yesterday's math quiz. This one was pretty tough, so anyone who scored over 100 did a great job. I rolled my eyes. Calling this level of difficulty tough was a joke. Jessica 109. Kevin 107. Only a dozen or so students passed. The rest all failed. I rested my forehead in my hand. This class was a total disaster. Mark 89. It was the buzz-cut kid. After getting his paper back, he actually had the nerve to raise his eyebrows at me smugly. I almost burst out laughing. Was he proud of failing by 1 point? Or was he showing off the fact that he could only raise both of his ridiculous eyebrows at the same time? But then someone shifted the focus onto me. Low. Ms. Evans drew out my name, and in an instant, every eye in the classroom was on me. 0. The lowest score before mine was still in the 70s. But me? I'd created a whole new category of failure. The class erupted in laughter. Oh my God. That's so embarrassing. So it wasn't him who was a genius, it was his phone's search engine. I could get a better score writing with my foot. Does he have the brain of a pig? Seriously. He's going to drag down our class average so much. At that, Ms. Evans's gaze became practically a physical force, pinning me to my seat with undisguised hatred and contempt. At Northwood High, student performance was the only metric for a teacher's job review, and Ms. Evans was notorious for only caring about top students. In her eyes, underachievers were basically subhuman. Last semester, she'd instigated a campaign to ostracize 2 struggling students in her class until they dropped out. Now that she had a dud like me in her class, she was in for a real headache. A girl's quiet voice piped up. But his paper was completely filled out. Am I the only one who thinks it's kind of hard to get a 0 when you write that much? But her voice was instantly drowned out by the chorus of ridicule. I went up to get my paper. Seeing my nonchalant expression, Ms. Evans shot me a venomous look. The difference between people is just astounding. Some people look like they have a brain, but if you were to cut it open, you might find it's all been eaten away by termites. She was just getting warmed up when a girl's voice from the doorway cut her off. Excuse me, I'm late. Ms. Evans looked surprised to see her, but the new girl was quick on the uptake. I'm Chloe, miss. Ms. Evans glanced at her roster and grade sheet, and her face immediately soured again. Another loser, it seemed. Not surprising. This was the same girl who had tapped on her desk during the placement test to get my attention, so she could copy my answers. A real piece of work. I glanced down and saw that the class list was typed, but Chloe's name was handwritten on a separate line at the bottom of the page. She probably pulled some strings to get in. Made sense. With her copy or turn in a blank sheet approach, she'd be lucky to get into Northwood at all, let alone Class B2, which was considered the best of the regular track classes. By the way, the other handwritten name on the line above hers was mine. Chloe completely ignored the teacher's sour expression, strode over on her long legs, and sat down in the empty seat next to me. She was casually holding a math paper. I wasn't interested, but I caught a glimpse of it out of the corner of my eye. I frowned at the paper in her hand. 33. I was baffled. How did you even manage that? How do you copy answers and still only get a 33? Her eyes sparkled with a subtle, mischievous light. You scored high. I pulled my own crumpled up test paper out of my desk and tossed it to her. When she saw the bright red goose egg, the corner of her mouth twitched. All right. I figured copying everything exactly might be too obvious, so I changed a whole row of answers on the fly. I glanced at her paper again. Damn. What kind of insane luck was that? Every single answer she changed randomly was correct. I shot a look at Ms. Evans, who was trying to teach at the board while throwing daggers at us with her eyes. I snatched my paper back and threw it over my head. With this idiot teacher and this class full of morons, the next 2 years were going to be rough. During the break after first period, we had to go get our textbooks. In every other class, it was all guys, but Mark, the moron acting as temporary class president, assigned Chloe to go too. He probably saw her talking to me earlier and decided to punish her by association. I shot a glare at Mark, who was strutting proudly at the front of the line, then turned to Chloe. I'll get yours in a bit. Just grab a few to make it look like you're helping. The textbook distribution area was crowded and hot. I saw Chloe's face getting flushed from the sun as she stood in line. I shifted a little to my left, blocking most of the scorching sunlight for her. Her face turned a little redder. Thanks. I was about to say it was nothing when I felt a piercing stare on me. I looked in that direction and saw Ethan, looking sharp and trim even in the standard issue blue and white school uniform, standing in the shade. I looked away, not wanting to deal with him. But if I wouldn't go to the mountain would come to me. Ethan's eyes were a little red as he looked at me. Leo, are you still mad at me? Mr. Shaw kept pressuring me that day. I cut him off. Oh, he pressured you? Then how did Mr. Shaw know I had a phone in my pocket? I never took it out. Wasn't it you who passed him a note, reporting me when you went to the bathroom? I checked when I left. The corner of your scratch paper was torn off. Or maybe, you're the one who slipped that phone into my uniform pocket in the first place? The only person who had come to my desk before the test that day was Ethan, bringing me a carton of milk. And then, a phone that wouldn't stop vibrating magically appeared in my pocket. And this was my best friend since middle school. A flash of panic crossed Ethan's eyes before he quickly suppressed it. He stuck his neck out, his face a mask of wounded innocence. Leo, how could you think that about me? We're best friends. This whole brotherly love act was making me sick. My patience was gone. I was about to walk away, but Ethan grabbed my arm. His voice rose, becoming sharp and shrill. Leo, I'm sorry. When Mr. Shaw asked me, I shouldn't have said I saw you take out your phone. His eyes were red, making him look incredibly wronged. I should have covered for you. Along with his voice, I heard the rustle of whispers from the surrounding crowd. Who's that? What's the drama? It's that junior Leo. Got into the school with the top score, then got caught cheating on his math final. Who knows how many times he did it before getting caught? I heard he cheated on the placement exam too. Shameless. Cheating himself and then blaming others for not covering for him. Ethan is a legitimate top 10 student in our year. His GPA is over 4.0. Does Leo even compare? I glanced back and saw a sea of faces behind me. Oh, so that was his game. This was the time when all 3 grades were picking up their textbooks. Ethan was making sure that anyone who didn't already know I was a cheater got the memo, reopening my wound and slapping me in the face in public. Interesting. Since when did I, Leo, ever care about saving face? A small smile played on my lips. I leaned in close to Ethan's ear and whispered, Ethan, do you remember what my nickname was back in middle school? Ethan's face changed dramatically as if he'd just remembered something terrifying. At the same time, I raised my voice. Really? You think you can beat Julia and be number 1 this year? I used to be number 1. After I was taken down, Julia, who had always been number 2, took the top spot. Julia had made a huge leap in her scores on the science track placement test, creating a nearly 40-point gap between her and second place. Her total score was over 700, making her a legend. She was way out of the league of someone like Ethan, who always hovered around the top 10. Ethan's face turned beet red. Leo, what are you talking about? I quickly raised my voice even louder to drown him out. Well then, congrats. I always said there was no way Julia could beat you. I mean, I only ever got first place because I was copying off you, right? The crowd was buzzing, clearly excited by this new development. My reputation was already shot, so there was nothing new to gossip about. But Julia was different. She was the rising star of the junior class. Northwood's shoo-in for MIT, the first one in a decade. And now someone was publicly challenging her for the top spot? In the monotonous landscape of high school life, this was a nuclear bomb of drama. Ethan's face was flushed with anger, his features twisting into an ugly grimace. I looked at him with a cold smile. I'd been lying low in the A track for a year, and it seemed Ethan had forgotten that back at our old middle school, I was famous for being the king of passive aggression. Someone even started a thread on the school's old Reddit page cataloging my best lines, calling it the Leo Sarcasm Bible. And now this clown thought he could just walk all over me? In his dreams. Ethan, out of respect for the 3 years you were there for me after my mom died, I won't expose you for framing me. We're even now. But if you ever mess with me again, I will absolutely destroy you. Ethan's mouth opened, as if he wanted to say something. But when his gaze fell on something behind me, his expression suddenly darkened. Looking like I'd bullied him to his breaking point, he clenched his fists, turned and stormed off. I knew what that meant. I turned around, and sure enough, there was Julia, standing about 10 feet away. Her skin was incredibly fair, which made her light, glass-like eyes stand out even more. Right now, those eyes were fixed on me, a complex emotion swirling within them. It was a face sculpted by the gods. No wonder Ethan was willing to stab me in the back for her. That's right. Ethan had a crush on Julia. And Julia, well, she probably had a bit of a crush on me, which is why Ethan was so hostile. Being humiliated in front of the girl he liked. And on top of that, having declared war on her in front of the whole school. How could his paper-thin ego handle it? I opened my palm towards Julia and wiggled my fingers in a little wave before turning and whistling my way back to class. Julia and I used to be called the twin stars of Northwood High. Except I was a shooting star. One that had already burned out. She was the North Star, constant and bright. Someone suddenly clapped me on the shoulder. A strange, square face appeared in my vision. Leo, looks like you're not too popular in Class A1 or B2. How about, you come join us in B1? A baby-faced guy next to him nodded enthusiastically. Class B1. The official home for academic misfits. They were still shouting after me. Hey, think about it. The regular classes moved at a much slower pace than the A track. The material was less in depth, and the homework was mostly basic problem types, hardly worth doing. As for Chloe, I glanced at the girl next to me, who was hunched over her Switch, playing some RPG. She was probably just too lazy to do it. This made Ms. Evans hate us even more. She would take passive-aggressive jabs at us in class almost every day. Some people are just bad apples. It's one thing to have no ambition for yourself, but to drag down your hardworking classmates. I'd heard it so many times my ears had gone numb. I just tuned her out. Chloe was even more brazen, acting like water off a duck's back. Today, however, was a little different. I heard the A-track teachers had been using past papers from top universities' advanced admissions programs as in-class exercises. Our regular class never participated in stuff like that. But Ms. Evans was extremely competitive and was clearly trying to raise the bar for her own class. She wrote a problem on the board. Class, this is a very cleverly designed problem. It might be a little challenging. Anyone who's interested can give it a try. I glanced up. It wasn't that hard. A basic application of Euler's formula. But the rest of the class was scratching their heads, looking completely lost. Next to me, Chloe was scribbling something on her paper. It looked like a pig with a long tail, or maybe a monkey that had eaten too much. Ms. Evans looked a little helpless but had to power through and explain her thought process. The students looked like they were half understanding, half drowning. Finally, someone couldn't help but ask, "Miss, what kind of problem is this?" "It's from the preliminary test for Harvard's advanced admissions program." Mark immediately grumbled. "Why are you giving us such a hard problem? It's not like any of us are getting into Harvard." Ms. Evans was speechless, fuming but unable to come up with a retort. I couldn't help but let out a snort of laughter. Perfect. This class was just perfect. Getting shot down twice in a row, Ms. Evans's face turned purple with rage. "Leo, get out. Go stand in the hall until class is over." I was happy to oblige. I'd rather stand outside and stare at the sky, the ground, the flowers, or the moon than look at that old hag's face for another second. I shot up from my seat and walked out. From this angle, I could clearly see Chloe's abstract drawing. Next to the pig-monkey creature was a small line of pencil text. I'd thought it was her signature, but now I could see it was a number. 2022. Something clicked in my head. That problem, the smallest positive integer n, was 2022. Was that a coincidence? When I got home that night, I was surprised to see my dad, who I hadn't seen in a month. We hadn't spoken since the cheating incident. But today he spoke first, his voice thick with the smell of alcohol. My old classmate got a promotion today. I went to his celebration dinner. He suddenly sat up from the couch, his eyes shot with blood. "That was supposed to be my job. It's all because of you. If news of you cheating hadn't spread all over the city, that opportunity would have been mine. How could they parachute someone else in over me?" I laughed, a bitter, angry sound. You know what kind of men like to belittle their wives and curse their children? Useless men. The reason you didn't get promoted is because you're not good enough. It has nothing to do with anyone else. You know perfectly well whether I cheated on that placement exam or not. The second someone accused me, you were the first one to slap me across the face, weren't you? All because you lost your temper and thought I embarrassed you. Do you see me as your son? Or as a trophy to polish your ego? A tool for you to brag about? And to think I called a man like you dad, and even threw away my grades and got zeros just to spite you? Huh. You're not even worth it. Without waiting to see his face turn purple, I went to my room and slammed the door. I didn't want to piss anyone off anymore. I just wanted to get through high school peacefully, get into college, and get as far away from this man as possible. But things never go according to plan. During the monthly exam, I was caught cheating again. This time, it wasn't just a phone in my pocket. There was a crumpled ball of paper on my desk, filled with densely written answers. Northwood High's rule was clear. Get caught cheating twice and you're expelled. Someone wanted me out of this school. I scanned the room. Most people were looking my way, and a few were frantically copying answers in the chaos. Only one person had his head buried in his test paper, as if he hadn't heard a thing. I frowned. This person, I didn't know him, but why did he look so familiar? But I didn't have time to dwell on it. I turned back to face Mr. Shaw. Well. Look who it is. We meet again. Congratulations, sir. A repeat performance. You've gone from Northwood's top math teacher to Northwood's top cheater catcher. Mr. Shaw's face turned ashen. There's no need for that. The evidence is right here. Do you admit to cheating or not? I smiled. I do not. Mr. Shaw's expression changed. I cut him off coolly. I have my reasons for not admitting it. I pointed to the answer sheet. On this sheet, 3 of the multiple choice answers are wrong, and 2 of the fill in the blanks are wrong. The last 2 long form problems are a complete mess. I would never copy answers like these, because if I were to do the test, I would only get a perfect score. This time everyone was stunned. Although I used to be first in the school, Ethan had always been intensely competitive. To spare his feelings, I always tried to keep my scores down somewhere in the top 10 similar to his. Math was Ethan's weakest subject, and also the easiest one for me to lower my score in. Because of this, everyone at Northwood High knew that math was my weak spot. That's also why almost no one questioned it when I was caught cheating in math. Thinking of this, Julia's face suddenly appeared in my mind. Her scores had improved dramatically on the last test. Clearly, she had been holding back before too. I did it for Ethan. Did she do it for me? Shaking myself out of my reverie, I looked up at Mr. Shaw. After his initial shock, a sneer appeared on his face. He had been the math teacher and homeroom advisor for the other A-track class, A2. The competition between Northwood's 2 A-track classes was as fierce as a battlefield. That's why he had been the first to accuse me of cheating in the exam room, nailing me to the pillar of shame. It was all just to take me, the number 1 student, down a peg. As his biggest headache for the past year, he had probably studied every single one of my math papers countless times. He knew my level all too well. Based on my past performance, a perfect score was impossible. I stood up, looking down at the slight bald spot on the top of his head. If you don't believe me, let's find out. Every time I got accused of cheating, certain people got unusually excited. Last time, it was my own father, who had rushed to the school to slap me across the face. This time, it was my new homeroom teacher, who hadn't even been on the job for a month. Ms. Evans came practically jogging in her high heels. She tried desperately to hide the smile on her face, but she couldn't keep the excitement out of her voice. What is going on with Leo? Cheating repeatedly, undermining our school's discipline, and setting a terrible example for his classmates. He must be severely punished. I looked at her with a half smile. So what do you think should be done, Ms. Evans? She cleared her throat, then squeezed out a pained expression, though her eyes were shining as she looked at Mr. Shaw next to me. That will have to be handled according to the school's regulations. The meaning was obvious: expulsion. Mr. Shaw, standing beside her, also smirked. Once his cheating is confirmed, the school will certainly punish him severely. Ha, confirmed, so sure of himself. But I wasn't about to get struck by lightning in the same place twice. Mr. Shaw led me to the office. Just before we went in, I glanced back at Ms. Evans, who was trailing behind us. Her cheeks flushed with excitement at the thought of finally getting rid of the dead weight in her class. This woman, whose only measure of a student's worth was their grades, who treated good students like treasure and bad students like dirt, was probably about to face the biggest blow of her career. For a moment, I almost felt sorry for her. Mr. Shaw had someone bring a blank copy of the monthly exam and place it in front of me. I picked up my pen, then suddenly put it down again. Mr. Shaw sneered. Having second thoughts now? I crossed my legs. Yes, I am. Mr. Shaw looked like he was about to choke. Seeing him uncomfortable made me feel particularly good. I paused deliberately before continuing. I've already seen this test. It's not fair. Let's use a new test paper. How about we use the A-Track's math exam? Although the A-Track and the regular classes took their monthly exams at the same time, the papers were on completely different levels of difficulty. Sometimes they even invited legendary test makers to write the questions. As soon as I said this, the other teachers in the office, who had been busy with their own work, all gathered around. For real? A young, sharply dressed teacher chimed in enthusiastically. Hey, the only way to know if a horse can run is to race it. He pulled a paper from his desk and slapped it down in front of me with a loud smack. I looked at his gleaming eyes and felt a strange sense of unease. The A-Track's test wasn't particularly difficult this time either. Only the last long-form problem had some teeth. Watching Mr. Shaw's face grow darker and darker as he stood beside me, I decided to twist the knife. After solving the final problem one way, I added 3 alternative solutions. Math used to be my favorite subject. I'd spent countless hours studying and exploring it. The more complex the concept, the more I wanted to master it. The harder the problem, the more I wanted to solve it. Back then, to accommodate Ethan, I often did my problem sets late at night at home, under a desk lamp, frequently looking up to find the morning sun already streaming in. I still remembered the thrill of solving a problem, the joy of success. It was its own kind of unparalleled high. But some scum had to come along and ruin that joy and passion. I channeled all my resentment into the tip of my pen, bringing it down hard for the final stroke. Then I put the pen down and said calmly, "You can grade it now." A sharp, short laugh suddenly broke the silence. Mr. Shaw slumped into a nearby chair, his face a mixture of self-mockery and resentment. He knew. The outcome was already decided. The other teachers, after a moment of stunned silence, all crowded around. The young teacher in the suit was the fastest. He scanned the paper quickly, then pointed at the last problem and burst out laughing. In such a short time, you not only used trigonometric substitution, but also thought to solve it using the Cauchy-Schwarz inequality? Interesting, very interesting. His hearty laughter served as the backdrop for the defeated figures of Mr. Shaw, who looked like a rooster that had lost a fight, and a pale-faced Ms. Evans. The other teachers were still muttering in disbelief. A perfect score? Is it really a perfect score? Ms. Evans walked forward, her lips trembling, her voice as dry as if she had a mouthful of glass shards. But wasn't Leo bad at math? No one answered her. A dead silence fell over the office. The difficulty of this test was on par with last year's college entrance exam. For a high school junior to finish it in under an hour and solve the final problem in 4 different ways meant one thing. It meant not only had I not cheated, it meant my academic record had no weaknesses. The junior class rankings were about to be completely shaken up. I was the one who broke the silence. I walked over to Mr. Shaw and once again looked down on him from above. "Mr. Shaw, you asked me for proof and I've given it to you. So now, isn't it your turn to apologize for your false accusation?" Mr. Shaw kept his head down and said nothing. The Dean of Students, Dean Miller, spoke for him. He pulled me aside. "Leo, last time's cheating incident wasn't entirely Mr. Shaw's fault. It was only because a phone was found in your pocket that he became suspicious." I gave a cold laugh. "Really? But my phone was in my pocket, and I never took it out. And don't you remember, Dean Miller, that Mr. Shaw's testimony at the time was that he personally saw me take out my phone to look up answers?" Dean Miller's expression stiffened for a moment, but he continued to try and smooth things over. Meanwhile, Mr. Shaw had already been whisked away into an inner office by the other teachers, disappearing from my sight. I felt a surge of anger and helplessness. I couldn't change this reality. A teacher's dignity was dignity. What about a student's? Just because we were students, we were always the weaker party, the ones who got framed and discriminated against. In a dispute between a teacher and a student, we could never get true justice. But good grades were a powerful tool for tipping the scales of fairness. If I hadn't gotten that perfect score today, I wouldn't have even had the right to speak out about the slander I'd endured. And I was done letting people walk all over me. I decided not to dwell on it, and brought up another matter with Dean Miller. "Dean, I want to transfer classes. At this, even the color from Ms. Evans's lips drained away. Dean Miller was silent for a moment, then nodded in agreement. Do you want to go back to Class A1? I shook my head. The 2A track science classes were run by my former homeroom teacher and Mr. Shaw. I didn't want to be in either. Suddenly, I remembered the two guys who had invited me to join their class while we were getting textbooks. Class B1. I want to go to Class B1. I don't know if it was my imagination, but the man in the suit standing to the side suddenly broke into a huge grin. When I went back to Class B2 to pack my things, Chloe wasn't there, but Mark was, making snide remarks. Wow, caught cheating a second time and still gets away with it. Can't hack it in this class, so you just switched to another. Impressive. They didn't know about my perfect score yet, only that I'd been caught cheating again. Someone else chimed in. Well, what do you expect with a dad like his? I shot him a cold look. The chill in my eyes startled him, and he instinctively shut his mouth. As I was walking out of the classroom with my backpack, I ran into Ms. Evans coming in with her teaching materials. Her gaze fell on my backpack, and her expression instantly dimmed, like Scrooge losing his treasure. As I walked down the hall, I could faintly hear her voice from the classroom. Leo, transferred 150 science track. A collective gasp of disbelief and shock erupted from behind me. Mark's sharp cry of impossible was the clearest and most jarring. I swung my backpack over my shoulder. The people and events here had nothing to do with me anymore. Class B1 was right below B2. It was still lunch break, and the room was a chaotic hub of students clustered in small groups, chatting and laughing. In the noisy environment, my eyes met a pair of sparkling, almond-shaped ones. A curse immediately slipped out. Holy crap, what are you doing here? Chloe was leaning against the wall, the long sleeves of her uniform rolled up to reveal slender, pale wrists. She mimicked the wave I'd given Julia, opening her palm and wiggling her fingers at me, a mischievous glint in her eyes. Hey desk buddy. Small world. I transferred too. You have got to be kidding me. No matter where I sat, Chloe shamelessly sat next to me. I had no choice but to let her be. Class B1, also unaware of my exoneration, had a completely different reaction. The guy in front of me was one of the two I'd met while getting textbooks. He turned around, his face serious. Leo, my man, I need to ask you something. He leaned in closer. How do you sneak your phone into the exam? They always catch me before I even get through the door. The square-faced guy next to him pushed him aside. Ben, get lost. Then he leaned over eagerly. Leo, do you only cheat in math? Does that mean your scores in other subjects are legit? You think you could tutor me? I've never gotten above a 65 in physics. A chorus of 7 or 8 voices immediately echoed his sentiment. Yeah, for me it's English. Man, English is killing me. Just as I was seriously considering prying open these kids' skulls to see what was inside, a familiar, sharply dressed teacher walked in beaming. Class, we have a new student today. Oh wait, 2 new students. Let me introduce. I put my head in my hands. So this class's weirdness was hereditary, passed down from their homeroom teacher. The door was thrown open with a bang, and a whirlwind of a figure crashed right into the teacher's outstretched hand, which was pointing at me. For a second, I was genuinely worried he'd broken his wrist. The newcomer was dark-skinned and had a booming voice. Big news, everyone. The infamous Leo has transferred to our class. Then he met my calm gaze and quickly pivoted. The kids from Class A1 are trashing Leo on the school forum, saying he's a disgrace and a bad apple in any class he's in. It turned out that after I had made a name for Ethan, some troublemaker on the forum had started a thread for him. It was titled Science A1 Showdown. Ethan's public challenge to Julia, who will take the crown? Last night, fueled by the monthly exam, the post had gone viral. Ethan had always been a smooth operator with a lot of friends. With a few twisted truths, he easily manipulated the narrative in Class A1, and a mob of them started flooding the forum to trash talk me. Some even started insulting our class, B1, by association. After all, in the eyes of these self-proclaimed elites, being one track below them was an insurmountable gap. The kids in the regular classes weren't even on their radar. Ben, listening to all this, suddenly shot up and slammed his hand on his desk. They're dissing our class? Those nerds have gone too far. The square-faced guy, Dave, also stood up. He was about to say something, then turned to me. You'll teach me physics, right? I smiled. Of course. I get perfect scores in physics. And I have plenty of teaching experience. He immediately turned back and slammed his desk too. He's one of us now. Messing with him is messing with me, Dave. He started hyping up the others. For the honor of our class, we have to stand together. Ben chimed in. Yeah. So what if we have weak subjects? Who in this class doesn't? Leo's math isn't great, but his other scores are solid. He can help us out, right? And somehow, they actually managed to rally the rest of the class. First, they spammed the forum, but they were no match for the A-track kids when it came to insults and got completely owned. So they decided to switch to physical intimidation, all jumping to their feet. Let's go. Time to pick a fight with Class A1. This crew didn't mess around. They surged towards the stairs like a tidal wave, and came face to face with another tidal wave of students at the landing. Leading the other group was Kyle from A1. He was tight with Ethan and had always had it out for me. I never knew why before, but now Ethan had probably been poisoning the well behind my back. The two groups faced off, the air thick with tension. In the end, it was our suit-wearing homeroom teacher, huffing and puffing, who managed to pull them apart. Kyle sneered. You losers can only throw your weight around physically. What are you, a bunch of apes? He had a point. The kids in B1 were generally a bit bigger. We're here to learn. If you've got the guts, let's settle this with our grades. The entire class B1 took a collective step back, leaving me standing conspicuously alone, like a crane among chickens. You bunch of cowards. I nodded. Fine. What are the stakes? This monthly exam. The losing class kneels on the field and calls the other class dad. The entire place fell silent. Dave was the first to speak up. You know, it's just a class rivalry, no need to get so serious. Ben immediately agreed. Yeah, they just said a few things, we can be the bigger people. Kyle looked at us with an I knew you were gutless expression, smugly continuing. Do you know why the school separates us into tracks? To sort us into different tiers. From the day we were tracked, you people were destined to be beneath us. You're behind us now. You'll be behind us on the college entrance exams, and you're fated to be our losers forever. Instantly, the faces of everyone in Class B1 turned ugly. What he said was harsh, but it was the truth. The school allocated the best resources and teachers to the 2A track classes, handpicking the most promising students with the goal of getting them all into top-tier universities. The other classes were like the school's cast-offs. At the beginning, the gap was only a few dozen points, but as time went on, the divide between them and the A-track students grew into an insurmountable chasm. This was the injustice of educational resource allocation. It was real, and it was unfair. Chloe, who had been leaning against the wall, casually twirling her phone, spoke up with a lazy air. The monthly exam is too soon. Let's make it the final. She suddenly looked up at Kyle, who was closest, her eyes sharp as knives. The losing class not only has to kneel and call the winner's dad, but they also have to stay on their knees and sing, I will survive. The A-track kids looked like they'd just heard the funniest joke in the world. A few of them were laughing so hard they had to lean against the wall for support. Ethan's eyes were filled with undisguised glee and schadenfreude. Are you guys insane? Ha 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 ha. Worried you won't be humiliated enough, so you're raising the stakes. Do you have any idea how far behind us your class's average score was on the placement test? 30 points. Do you know what a 30-point difference means? You're not even trying to make your bluffs believable. A 30-point average difference was practically a canyon. Kyle was the first to stop laughing. He took a step forward and looked down at me. I know you got a perfect score in math this time, but so what? You can't save an entire class. In the end, you'll still have to kneel and call me dad. Class B1 collectively. What perfect score. The homeroom teacher in the suit, who had been sidelined for a while, finally found an opening to speak. I wasn't finished. Our new student, Leo, already had his math score from the monthly exam graded separately. He got a perfect score and it was on the A-track version of the test. Classe B1, collectivelle. Someone pushed Kyle aside with one hand. It was Julia. She was holding her backpack in her other hand. Julia pulled me back a step to stand with the B1 students. Starting today, I'm transferring to Class B1. The crowd erupted. Science Class B1 collectively. Oh. The homeroom teacher's face was split by a grin, but he managed to regain some composure. Julia, that doesn't seem to be in line with the regulations. Julia's face was expressionless. I'll talk to the principal about the transfer myself. The homeroom teacher was ecstatic. Great. Kyle's face turned red. This is ridiculous. So what if you have the top 2 students? Do you really think 2 aces can carry a team of scrubs? Julia, you'll regret this. Julia's expression remained calm, but her words were devastating. You don't need to worry about whether I'll regret it or not. You all should probably go practice your breathing, so you don't go off key when you're singing on your knees. This time, the first person to speak from the other side was surprisingly Ethan. He was usually so gentle and attentive around Julia, a total suck-up, but now he looked like a demon clawing its way out of hell. His eyes were bloodshot as he glared at Julia. Are you insane? For him, you made a bet with our homeroom teacher, promising to score over 700 on 2 consecutive monthly exams, just so he could get back into Class A1. And now you're stooping so low as to go to a regular class for him? You'd throw away your own future for him? Julia, you're crazy. Julia looked at him blankly, as if he were an insignificant ant. This is my business. It has nothing to do with you. A string of laughter forced its way out of Ethan's throat. Nothing to do with me, a fine nothing to do with me. He suddenly turned his venomous, resentful gaze on me. Leo, this is all because of you. If it weren't for you, none of this would have happened. His eyes were so red they looked like they might start bleeding. After this final exam, I'm going to personally watch you kneel before me. Although the kids from B1 put up a brave front, once they were back in their own classroom, they were all pretty despairing. Especially their homeroom teacher, Mr. Davis. He rested his chin on his hand at the front of the class, his voice tinged with sympathy. The kids from A1 have a point. 2 aces can't carry a team of scrubs, so next month, am I going to see you all on the field calling another class dad? He lowered his voice and continued. Can you at least wear masks? So no one knows I'm your teacher. Fortunately, they were also stubborn. After first period, I was pulled into a group chat. Chloe and Julia were added at the same time. I had just glanced at the member list when the group name changed. Class B1 will not kneel. Northwood High was a science-focused school, and Class B1 was the top of the regular track classes. There was a gap between them and the A track, but it wasn't insurmountable. Especially with Julia and me joining, they started to feel like they actually had a sliver of a chance. It seems that as long as people can see a glimmer of hope, they have the motivation to strive for it. And with motivation, anything is possible. And so, I experienced a level of academic intensity one never had even in the A track. The students in B1 actually had very strong individual subject scores, some even excellent, but as Ben said, they were extremely specialized. Often, one weak subject would drag down their overall score, relegating them to the second tier. To shore up their weaknesses, a constant stream of students came to Julia and me for help. They seemed to have automatically divided themselves up. English, math, and language arts came to me. Physics, chemistry, and biology went to Julia. Later, Julia and I noticed that some questions were being asked repeatedly, so we started grouping those students together to teach them all at once, which slowly evolved into a small group tutoring model. The junior year curriculum was packed, and there wasn't much free time. So we had to use the half hour before morning study hall, during lunch, and after evening study hall. I would often come to the classroom in the morning and see a line of students standing by the window, memorizing vocabulary. Sometimes they'd be so focused that the bell for study hall would ring, and the breakfast buns in their hands would be cold and forgotten. The morning light would catch the hair at their temples, making it seem like every strand was glowing. The moment the bell rang to end evening study hall, the sounds of chairs scraping, footsteps, and closing doors from other classrooms would be deafening. But in our class, students would quietly grab their chairs and gather around for our small group sessions. On hot summer days, The fan overhead would creak as it turned, and a group of students would stare up at my notes on the board, their focus startlingly intense. Outside the window, it was the height of the summer afternoon, but the blazing sun was in their eyes. I put down the chalk and suddenly said, "We're going to win." They paused for a moment, then broke into smiles. "We're going to win." In another corner, Julia's group heard us and echoed our words with even more force, catching the tail end of our cheer. "We're going to win." Finally, the entire classroom of B1 was filled with those 4 words, echoing for a long time. This was the sound of September. This was our 17th year. Lately, the teachers of Class B1 had been feeling the pressure. Not only were the students pushing them to catch up to the A-Track's curriculum, but some students who couldn't get a spot in my or Julia's sessions started ambushing their subject teachers right after class. The questions would last the entire break, to the point where the English teacher couldn't take it anymore, and went to complain to Mr. Davis. Mr. Davis stood at the front of the class, looking very troubled. "I know you all are enthusiastic about learning, but you have to be considerate of your teachers. You've taken up all their time for water breaks, and your English teacher, she doesn't even have time to change her tampon." Was that something he was supposed to say? The one person who didn't fit in with B1's crazed study mode was Chloe. Once her scores from the placement test were announced, she became the black sheep in the eyes of the class. They didn't ostracize her though. Instead, they all scrambled to tutor her. One day the math rep would drop off a stack of key concepts. The next the English rep would write out a template for essay structures. And the day after that the physics rep would give her a cheat sheet of all the major test points. She was cooperative, but aside from English, she never looked at any of it. When she did study, she only worked on English. This infuriated everyone, and they cornered her collectively. Chloe looked innocent. "If I told you I was the second hidden genius in our class, would you believe me?" Everyone glared at her. If looks could kill, she'd have been dead 1,000 times over. Not everyone was a Leo. The kids in B1 weren't stupid. Chloe shrugged helplessly. "See, I knew you wouldn't believe me, which is why I didn't bother saying anything." She threw up her hands. "And look, I never offered to teach you guys, did I?" 3 days later, I overheard Ben and a few others trying to convince Chloe to transfer classes. "Goddess, we're not looking down on struggling students. But this is a life or death situation, please try to understand." Yeah, a man's pride is priceless. How can you bear to watch us offer up our pride to those scumbags in the A-Track? Besides, that Ethan from A1 has gone crazy. He said if they win the bet, he'll give everyone in his class $10,000. As he spoke, Dave pretended to wipe away a non-existent tear. I raised an eyebrow. I knew Ethan's family was rich, but I didn't realize they were that rich. Using money to motivate them? That was against the rules. He must really love to hate. I nudged Julia, who was sitting across the aisle from me. She actually gave a faint smile, which surprised me. The Ice Queen could actually smile? Ben, meanwhile, was more direct. "Chloe, I heard you got in through connections. Why don't you find a way to transfer to Class A1? He pounded his chest, looking like he was in the midst of a tragic farewell. Drag them down from the inside. Be the hero who sacrifices herself for the greater good. Class B1 will remember you forever." The day of the monthly exam finally arrived. Mr. Davis had specially requested that our class get the same test papers as the A-Track. I heard the school administration tried to talk him out of it, telling him not to set us up for failure, but he wouldn't budge. Dave went around giving every student a high five, adding, "You got this." When he got to Chloe, his words changed to, "Just do your best. We've got your back." I almost spat out my water. The exam room was quiet, filled only with the sound of pens scratching on paper. I let out a slow breath and picked up my pen. All this frantic studying from Class B1, what kind of results would it yield? It had only been half a month. Of course we couldn't win, but how big would the gap be? I lowered my eyes to the test in front of me. I also wanted to know what I was capable of. Compared to Julia, who was no longer holding back, who was stronger. But as I got to the second page, a flash of realization crossed my mind. Sure enough, as soon as I walked out of the exam room, I was met by Ben and Dave running towards me. Ben was yelling as he ran, "Leo, you are My God. Aha. You predicted the last 3 long-form problems. Aha. Of course, I hadn't predicted the exact questions, but a couple of days ago in our small group session, I had focused on conditional probability formulas and the binomial theorem. And the 3 long-form problems on the test were about 80% similar to the examples I had used. Ben was naturally loud, and now he was excited, so his voice could probably be heard 2 miles away, which meant Ethan, Kyle, and the others who were just coming out of the classroom next door definitely heard him. Their faces immediately soured. I smirked. Psychological warfare was an important part of winning, so I raised my voice and called back. Yeah, what a coincidence. How did I manage to predict the exact topics? I must have some insane luck. Sure enough, their steps quickened, and Ethan almost tripped over Kyle. Their focus was broken. When Mr. Davis arrived at the classroom door with the grade reports, Dave stopped him with an outstretched hand. Wait. He shakily took out a bottle of nitroglycerin pills from his pocket, popped one under his tongue, and then, with an expression of grim resignation, he moved his hand. You may enter. Although I looked calm, I realized my own palms were clenched. Even Chloe, who was usually all smiles, had a serious expression on her face. Mr. Davis stood at the front of the class, beaming. My heart skipped a beat. That happy? Could it be? Could we have one? It was almost impossible, but what if everyone in the A track had a massive off day? Ben quickly turned around. Last weekly quiz, our class average was 0.1 points ahead of B2, and he had the same expression. Don't fall for it. Mr. Davis had already started speaking. Class, our average scores are in. The gap between us and Class A1 is. He met the collective stare of 45 students and finally uttered the number that had everyone on edge. 10.2 points. The hope I didn't even dare to believe in was dashed. A bitter smile escaped my lips. But closing a 19-point gap in half a month was still an incredible achievement. Sure enough, the kids in B1 went wild. Ben even jumped onto the teacher's desk, almost kicking Mr. Davis in the face. Guys, we worked a miracle. No, a divine intervention. The English class rep, a girl, had already burst into tears. Anyone who didn't know the context would have thought we'd won. Finally, Ms. Evans from Class B2 knocked on our door, a frown on her face. Can your class please keep it down? Other classes are trying to learn. You're being so loud. As she looked into the room, her gaze fell on me and Chloe, and her expression became incredibly complex. A mix of regret and remorse. What was even stranger was that she looked at Chloe for even longer than she looked at me. I was a bit surprised and followed her gaze to Chloe. Chloe noticed me looking and raised an eyebrow. What? Suddenly realize how beautiful I am. Mr. Davis smilingly escorted Ms. Evans out, then closed the door and winked at us. She's in a bad mood. We took the A-track test and still beat her class's average by 7 points. She's probably fuming. Keep it down, you guys. Don't poke the bear. Ben ignored him and urged. So the top 2 spots are in our class, right? Leo and Julia? Mr. Davis's expression suddenly became a little strange. He stood up straighter than usual. Here's the thing. I suggest that anyone standing should sit down. Those on desks are prone to overexcitement, so you might want to sit and hold on to your desk. Class B1 collectively. He cleared his throat and waited until everyone was seated before continuing. The top 2 spots in the grade are indeed in our class. Lao, 727. Language Arts 132, Math 150, English 150, Science Composite 295. Julia 725. Language Arts 130, Math 150, English 150, Science Composite 295. Even though they knew Julia was capable of scoring over 700, hearing 2 scores over 720 was still a shock for Class B1. A score over 720 was enough to be in the top 10 in the entire state. Ben leaned on his desk. Demons. Dave sounded drained. Good thing I was holding on to my desk. Our teacher is a genius. I frowned. It must have been that multiple-choice physics question. I wasn't sure about it. Where did the other 2 points go? Julia's brow was also slightly furrowed, clearly not satisfied with her score either. After announcing our scores, Mr. Davis's expression became even more peculiar, with a hint of pity in his eyes. As for Chloe, the whole class immediately knew who his pity was directed at. Ben turned and patted Chloe on the shoulder. "Don't be sad, it's okay. I mean, who can compare to these two?" The word freaks was just forming on his lips when Mr. Davis finished his sentence. She had the only perfect science score in all 3 classes, but because her English was only a 90, it dragged her down. She only got a 685. Third in the grade. And so the word freaks transformed from a single word into a sky-shattering scream. Freaks. I'm sure everyone in the class felt the exact same way he did, including me. I turned to look at Chloe beside me. She was resting her chin on her hand, looking right back at me. Seeing my gaze, she raised an eyebrow again. "See? Now you really see how beautiful I am." The corners of her eyes naturally tilted upwards, making her look flirtatious whenever she smiled. I held her gaze for 2 seconds. Then I turned away, gritting my teeth. "You and your pig with a long tail, you and your 2022. You were playing me this whole time." This revelation slapped the rest of Class B1 out of their daze. Now, they finally understood who Mr. Davis's pity was really for. It was for every single one of their sorry asses. When a mob descended on Chloe to give her a beating, I made sure to step aside to give them room. My back happened to press against Julia's desk. Julia didn't seem too surprised by Chloe's true identity. Just a quick flutter of her long eyelashes. She was holding the grade reports for all 3 classes, studying them closely. Then she spoke, her voice devoid of emotion. This time we had 2 advantages. First, we happened to hit on the topics for the last 3 long-form problems, which led to a higher overall score on that section. Second, your psychological tactic distracted them. Their class average in English was 1.5 points lower than last time. It must have been on the listening section. She wrote a few numbers on a piece of paper and circled 2 of them. So, removing these random factors, I estimate that the actual gap between our average scores is around 16 to 18 points. I looked down at the number and suddenly laughed. Doesn't seem like that much, does it? Julia paused. Then a smile spread across her face, seeming to cast a soft glow over her. No. After their initial burst of excitement, the students of Class B1 looked devastated upon hearing Julia's analysis. So they hadn't even closed half the gap? They were hoping to leapfrog the competition, but it turned out they hadn't even caught up to the starting line. Adding fuel to their fire was running into the kids from Class A1 in the cafeteria at lunch. The A1 students didn't look too happy either, but seeing us seemed to galvanize them, and they put on their usual mocking expressions. Well, if it isn't the losers." Ethan's face was a cold mask of contempt. "So what if you played some mind games to mess with us, Leo? So what if the 3 of you have scores way higher than everyone else? We won't make the same mistake twice, and you won't be lucky enough to guess the topics every time. Don't forget, our bet is about the entire class." His gaze swept over the students of B1, who were busy eating. The purpose of exams is to filter for talent. They are the rejects from that filtering process. These rejects, they're going to drag you down, and in the end, you'll have to kneel right alongside them. The B1 students turned purple with rage, but with their mouths full of food, they couldn't argue back, which only made them turn a darker shade of purple. I looked at the group across from us, feeling a sense of déjà vu. Once upon a time, I was one of them. While I wasn't exactly one of the cool kids, I did look down on students with poor grades, just as I had with Mark. But the students of B1 had accepted me when I was still in the mud, my name not yet cleared. They had never once looked down on Chloe when she was hiding behind her slacker persona. They had been dragged into this mess for no reason, yet they had fought harder than anyone over the past half-month. How were they any less than them? I stood up and faced Ethan. "You're right. The purpose of education is to filter for talent. So on behalf of the top 3 students filtered out by Northwood High, I'd like to say a few words." The eyes of every student in B1 turned to me. Looking at them, pride slowly filled my gaze. They are not rejects. They are just like you, fledgling eagles, ready to take flight. Their wings may still have some imperfections. But with every test flight, they will continue to strengthen their feathers. And no one knows who will fly higher or farther in the future. The sun broke through the clouds, once again landing in the eyes of the B1 students, making them sparkle. At the next table, someone from Class B2 angrily slapped Mark on the back. "This is all your fault. If you hadn't picked on Leo, he and Chloe would have stayed, and they would have brought Julia over too. Then it would be our class showing up A1 today." Ethan happened to overhear this, and his face twisted with rage. He shot a final parting remark at us. "Don't get too cocky. We'll see about that." Ben, perhaps still high on my sentimental speech, chased after them, taunting their retreating backs. "You bet we'll see. This final, not only is Class B1 going to smoke your average, but we're also going to have 3 students score over 730. If not, I'll streak across the field after the exam." Class B1 collectively. Back in the classroom, Dave pointed at his forehead and yelled, "You idiot! Why did you sell us out?" Ben looked shocked. "Ha! I thought we were just supposed to keep one-upping each other." He leaned over to me and Julia. "You two said you felt like you didn't do that well, right? So if you do well, you'll hit 730. Julia and I smile. Respectfully. "Then why did you say 3? Dave asked, exasperated. "3 sounds more impressive. 2 is just sad." All right, now the pressure was on the village's last hope, Chloe. Ben finally understood the gravity of the situation, and immediately latched onto her leg weeping. "Goddess, you have to save my hide." Chloe smiled. "No problem. Since I'm fighting for the honor of our class and your hide, can I request that Leo give me private lessons?" I grabbed a copy of 45 practice sets for the final English exam and smiled at her. "Let's go." After this monthly exam, the subject teachers, who had previously been uninspired and dismissive of our bet, suddenly became actively cooperative. Most of them had been at this school for a good chunk of their careers, and had never once gotten to one-up the A-track teachers. This was too good. First up was the formidable English teacher. Whenever she had a free period or during lunch, she'd march into our classroom, plant herself at the front desk like a guardian statue, and announce, "Anyone with questions, line up. I'm telling you, class, if you can beat Class A1's average in English, your English teacher will never have a period again." Ben, whose English was the worst, became her primary target. Eventually, even the hyper-motivated Ben was crying uncle, saying he was completely drained. But after rolling around on his desk for a few minutes, he'd get back up and start working on his reading comprehension. The rest of Class B1 automatically assigned Chloe to physics and chemistry. Julia took over language arts from me. The 3 specialists in their respective corners were a picture of harmony. The second monthly exam arrived quickly. As expected, we didn't advance, we regressed. The gap between our average and Class A1's widened to 13.4 points. We were treated to another round of taunts from Ethan and his crew. But this time, we didn't even bother to respond. According to Ben, while Ethan was running his mouth, he was mentally reviewing English sentence structures, to the point that Ethan's nose started to look like the letter J. Impressive. That day at lunch, we all chipped in to buy him an extra chicken leg. Class A1, of course, felt us breathing down their necks and reportedly tried to set up their own small group tutoring. But I'd been there. I knew that deep down, everyone in that class saw each other as a rival. They would never truly collaborate. Sure enough, no one was willing to be a tutor. The plan fell through, and I heard Ethan was furious. Third monthly exam, a 5.2-point gap. The distance was shrinking. On this exam, Chloe's English score shot up to 143, bringing her total to 731, tying with Julia and just 1 point behind me. Ben tearfully clutched her English paper, feeling that his hide might just be saved after all. I wasn't surprised at all. While tutoring Chloe, I had discovered that unlike other students who struggled with English, her pronunciation and feel for the language were excellent. Her problem was a high error rate on tests, and she was always questioning the test maker's intent. I later found out that she had lived abroad until her freshman year. Her only issue with English was that it didn't conform to the standardized testing model. Difficulty to fix. 1 star. Okay, this girl was basically a cheat code. Nice. After another late-night tutoring session that stretched past 11 p.m., I was rubbing my temples as I left school when I saw a familiar face at the gate. That guy, wasn't he the one who threw the answer sheet on my desk during the first monthly exam? So much had happened since then that I'd forgotten about it. I never expected to run into him at this time of night. He seemed to be on the phone. After hanging up, he turned into an alley on the right. I hesitated for a moment, then followed him, and saw the person waiting for him deep inside the alley. Ethan? A flash of realization hit me. I had seen this guy before. He was Ethan's cousin. I'd seen him a couple of times in middle school from a distance, and since I'm a bit face blind, I hadn't recognized him at first. So the second person to frame me for cheating was also Ethan. Unbelievable. To be such a dog, all for a girl. As I was silently cursing him, Ethan's gaze suddenly flicked towards my hiding spot. My heart jumped. Had he anticipated I would follow him? Sure enough, a venomous look slowly filled Ethan's eyes. I felt a chill run down my spine. I turned my head and saw that my escape route was blocked by 7 or 8 burly men, all holding weapons. Crap. It was a trap. Ethan's voice echoed in the quiet alley. Northwood High's policy is that skipping an exam counts as a 0 and is factored into the class average. A vicious smile twisted his lips. Let's see if your class can still make a comeback without you to carry them, and with 4 zeros dragging them down. Break both of his hands. He was ruthless. My lungs were about to explode with anger, but a wise man knows when to retreat. I was already scanning for an escape route. Suddenly, a figure darted out from behind the group of men, moving like lightning. She didn't slow down as she reached the human wall, but charged straight through. Her movements were so fast and strange that neither side had time to react. She had actually managed to break through. She ran to my side, grabbed my hand, and pulled me into an alley on the right. Chloe? This area was a maze of deep, confusing alleys. A normal person would get lost, but she moved with speed and precision, as if she were in her own backyard. The thugs were hot on our heels. My heart was pounding at what felt like 180 beats per minute. Damn it! Was I really going to die here at such a young age? Chloe yanked me around a sharp corner. There was a light ahead, and what looked like people. She started yelling as she ran. Are you all dead? Get over here and save me. As she finished speaking, she pulled me out of the alley and behind a line of men in black suits who were waiting at the entrance. My brain short-circuited for a second before I realized. These were bodyguards? The rest was handled by her bodyguards. Chloe and I collapsed onto the ground, the cool pavement soothing my overheated body after the run. It actually felt pretty good. I couldn't help but complain. Miss Chloe, you're such a coward. Normally in this kind of situation, you're supposed to fight alongside me, to the bitter end. Chloe was speechless. That's an action movie. I'm in a high school drama. I've run through these alleys a million times to dodge the people my dad sends to watch me. I know them like the back of my hand. Don't worry, I wouldn't let you get hurt. I looked up at the sky, at the vast expanse of stars. Chloe, why did you really transfer to Northwood High? The person beside me suddenly propped herself up. The next second, Chloe's face filled my vision, the damp ends of her hair almost brushing my cheek. That's a secret. From that day on, we were extra careful. We always left school in a group, never giving Ethan another opportunity. Chloe repeatedly suggested we go beat Ethan up, but I refused. We couldn't do anything illegal. I wanted to make that scumbag lose so badly he'd have no excuses. Finally, the day before the final exam arrived, Ben finished his breakfast and was about to put on his headphones for English listening practice. Suddenly he exclaimed, "Hey, I finished breakfast in 3 minutes and 30 seconds today. A new record." It was a completely random and pointless comment, but no one in the room laughed. For this battle, every single person in Class B1 had been living on a schedule of a 5-minute breakfast, 9-minute lunch, and 7-minute dinner. Every waking moment not spent in the bathroom was spent studying. When they got tired, they chugged coffee and strong tea. More than half the class had written so many practice tests that their hands were raw, so they wrapped them in bandages and kept writing. I clenched the book in my hand. Nothing was going to stop our class from winning. The day of the final exam. Our class, usually a hive of tense, diligent energy, was surprisingly relaxed. I saw Ben take at least 15 minutes to eat his breakfast. He wiped his mouth, stood up, and suddenly got sentimental. Guys, win or lose, I love you all. Class B1 collectively. Not sure whether to be touched or disgusted. As we were heading to our respective exam rooms, we once again ran into Class A1 coming down the stairs. This time neither side started anything. We just silently passed each other. Even Ethan only gave me a cold glance. Everyone knew. The final moment had arrived. This final exam was a joint exam for the 9 top cities in the region. Although it was called the 9-city joint exam, only the 9 best schools participated. This included the undisputed king of our province, city number 2 High. Northwood High, despite its impressive name and being the best in our city, was at the bottom of these 9 schools. Compared to city number 2, we weren't even in the same league, we were like their grandkids. So this exam was significantly harder than our usual monthly tests. I suddenly felt a twinge of worry. Could they do it? I worked through the math problems in front of me, one by one. Vectors, everyone has a good grasp on this now. Regression equations, I've gone over problems of this difficulty with them. Arithmetic sequences, Dave asked about this exact type of problem last time. I suddenly paused my pen. I realized I had nothing to worry about. They had worked hard enough. And now it was time for that hard work to pay off. After the science exam that afternoon, I saw Julia and Chloe walking towards me, smiles on their faces. I imagined that they, in their exam rooms, had felt the same way I had. Dave came up from behind and slung an arm around Chloe. Oh my God, what am I going to do? I think I aced the physics section. What if I got a perfect score? Chloe smiled and gently removed his arm. You didn't. The second and third parts of the last long-form problem were traps. And you fell right into them. Dave smiled. Peacefully. The grading period for the 9-city joint exam was longer than usual, 3 days. Ben had told us all to stay calm, to keep a level head. In the end, the only ones who were actually calm were me, Chloe, and Julia. The English rep's usually soft voice suddenly became shrill as she grabbed her deskmate's ear. What? You got this question wrong? How could you lose these 3 points? This one stupid mistake just lowered our class average by 0.067 points. Repent. Dave had recreated the last physics problem from memory and was staring at it, scratching his head. Where's the trap? I don't think I made a mistake. Huh. Zach, who usually had the lowest scores, was doing a ritual dance in front of the blackboard. Please let the 8 questions I guessed on be right. Oh gods of academics, please, please. I was laughing at the scene when a paper ball hit me on the forehead. I glared in its direction and saw Chloe sitting casually on Dave's desk. She had just finished explaining the problem to Dave, thoroughly crushing his confidence in the process, and was now glowing with satisfaction, a smile still playing on her lips. Hey you two. Who do you think will be number 1 this time? I paused, realizing that there was also a paper ball on Julia's desk. Ben leaned over. Obviously you guys. Who in Class A1 can compete with you 3 freaks? Chloe just smiled, her eyes still on me and Julia. The girls' pupils were very dark. The sunlight coming through the window cast a golden rim around them, making them shine with a startling intensity. Julia and I both knew what number 1 she was talking about. After a long moment, it was Julia's voice that broke the silence. Us. I always thought Mr. Davis's smile was permanently etched on his face, the kind of smile that made you want to punch him a little. But I never expected this. He was crying. The students of Class B1, who had been waiting for him to announce the scores, were all in a panic. Hey Mr. D, don't be like this. Did we lose? If we lost, we'll definitely wear masks. We won't tell anyone you're our teacher. Mr. Davis stood at the front of the class, a man who was usually so meticulous and stylish, now wiping his tears and snot on the sleeve of his suit. Then he bowed deeply to us. Chris, who had gone up to offer him a tissue, was so shocked that he fell right on his butt. He rubbed his backside. What was that for, Mr. D? Ow, that hurts. Mr. Davis straightened up and cleared his throat. Class, this exam, our average score was 613, which is 1.4 points higher than Class A1's average. Our class average alone puts us in the top 5 among the 9 schools. If you keep up this performance, you might become the only class in Northwood High's history to have every single student get into a top-tier university. Congratulations! You did it! You created a miracle. I knew they would be happy if we won. I just didn't expect them to be this happy. When Ben started ripping his shirt off like an ape, I suddenly thought that Kyle's occasional descriptions were pretty accurate. Dave, who had been excitedly doing burpees, finally noticed that his deskmate was verging on public indecency and quickly tackled him to the ground. Mr. Davis's eyes were red. This was my first time being a homeroom teacher. I used to always think that if I ever became a homeroom teacher, I would want my students to enjoy learning. Even if their grades weren't great, they wouldn't be looked down on, and they would still be treated fairly. When you made that bet, to be honest, even I didn't believe you would win. But you. At this point, his voice started to break. You showed me what it means to give it your all and work together. You showed me the infinite potential in every student. And you showed me that joy and learning can coexist. I will never forget the lesson you've taught me. Thank you. With that, he bowed deeply to us again. His heartfelt speech brought most of the girls in the class to tears. The boys were also deeply moved. Seeing the mood suddenly turn somber, Ben tried to lighten it up. Mr. D, you're getting too serious. We just didn't want to kneel for those scumbags in A1. But his eyes were red too. Somewhere along the way, we had started fighting for more than just a childish bet. It was as if we had led ourselves up to another level, breaking through the ceiling that had confined us, and had just touched the edge of another world. And none of us wanted to go back. In that moment, we truly understood the meaning of learning. Not for anyone else, not for any bet, but for ourselves. Every single one of us wanted to see higher, to go farther. Also, this time my, Chloe's, and Julia's total scores were all 732, tied for first in the joint exam. Historically, City Number 2 High had always swept the top 10 spots in the science track on this exam, never giving any other school a chance. Even the kids in B1 who were always calling us God Leo, God Chloe, and God Julia, still thought we were just big fish in a small pond. They figured that Northwood's exams were just easier. And when it came to a big stage like the joint exam, the 3 of us wouldn't be able to compete with the super geniuses from City Number 2. And so they received a second shock. Hearing this news, Ben's expression was complicated. He held it in for a long time before finally voicing his thoughts. How did you 3 gods end up in a second-rate school like Northwood, in a third-rate class like B1? The 3 of us. Personal business. No comment. With the results of the bet decided, it was time to follow through on the stakes. The school administration, which had been so nonchalant before, suddenly got involved, sending wave after wave of people to persuade us to let it go, to be magnanimous. Ben was the first to respond. He covered his ears. What are you saying? Is there a dog barking? This nearly made the Dean of Student Affairs swear. I pulled Ben behind me and faced the Dean, my demeanor respectful but firm. Dean, this is something we are not willing to and will not let go of. When we were being bullied and insulted by Class A1, the school did not step in to defend us in any way. And now that we have, through our own efforts, torn off the reject label that was stuck on us, who has the right to persuade us to give up the fruits of 3 months of hard work? But in truth, when Class A1 was kneeling on the field singing, I will survive, none of us actually went to watch. The condescending words of the past, the humiliated looks of the present, none of it mattered to us in Class B1 anymore. This was our own transformation. Everyone else was just a supporting character in our story. Northwood High, having unexpectedly swept the top 3 spots in the province, gave the principal a massive ego boost, and he insisted on holding an award ceremony. There was even prize money. The 3 of us were dragged up like puppets to receive our awards, then pulled into various group photos with a host of administrators. Our faces were sore from smiling. The moment Chloe stepped off the stage, she tossed all 3 of our prize envelopes into Dave's arms. Take it. Get the party started for the crew. Our class president grinned from ear to ear. You got it. Just as we thought the principal was about to launch into another long and repetitive motivational speech, he suddenly sobered his expression. Students, I am announcing a major reform at our school. In the past, our school has always tracked students into a track in regular classes based on the entrance exam, and then the Science Humanities placement test in sophomore year would decide their fate for the next 2 years. But the comeback of Class B1 has shown us that a single test cannot define the future of a group of students. Some people may fall behind temporarily, but they never stop chasing their goals. While competition exists, and absolute fairness is hard to achieve, we have decided that starting with the next incoming class and rank will no longer be set in stone. There will be a monthly exam, and class assignments will be re-evaluated based on the new monthly rankings. This way, every student's effort will be rewarded. Class B1, which had been indifferent to the praise and the prize money, fell silent, and then in the next moment, erupted into a deafening cheer. Northwood High had always been a one-test-decides-all kind of place. The A-track students were treated like royalty, given the best teachers and resources. The students in the regular classes were just along for the ride, and it seemed the only expectation for them was to get into a decent university to make the school's graduation stats look good. The spotlight wasn't on them. The glory wasn't for them. But this time, Northwood High saw the potential in every student, and it saw the flaws in its own outdated rules. We had never imagined that this all-out effort would change more than just ourselves. We had become the rule breakers, but also the rule makers. Fairness was about to be extended to every runner who put in the effort. In that moment, I saw excitement and pride in the eyes of everyone in Class B1. We decided to blow the entire $2,500 prize money in one go. Dave eagerly planned the activities, reportedly with a passion that rivaled his exam prep. The first weekend after winter break, led by our class president, we started with a day at an amusement park. The screams on the pirate ship ride released the pressure that had been building in our chests for months. We could start the next semester with a clean slate. After helping a green-faced Ben, who loved rides but had a weak stomach, we headed to our second destination, a karaoke bar. The Mike Hoggs, Dave and another guy, Mike, sang their hearts out, leaving no songs for anyone else. I rubbed my forehead and decided to step outside for some fresh air. The stars were sparse and dim tonight. I leaned against a corner wall, looking up quietly, when a figure appeared beside me. Chloe's hair was tousled by the night wind, her eyes shimmering with a tipsy haze. What, did their singing deafen you? I thought of their earth-shattering rendition of Bohemian Rhapsody, and couldn't help but smile wryly. Is this your first time drinking? Chloe asked. I was taken aback. She pointed a finger near my face. You're beet red. If you knew, you wouldn't let anyone see. You care too much about your pride. This time I was truly stunned. Ever since my fallout with Ethan, everyone thought I was shameless. Dave and Ben even jokingly called me a savage. This was the first time anyone had said I had pride. She was right. If I didn't have pride, if my ego wasn't so fragile, would I have reacted so extremely after my dad slapped me, pushing myself into such a miserable corner? Looking back now, it was so childish. So stupid. Chloe suddenly leaned closer, the faint smell of alcohol enveloping me. Lau. Looking at the girl's eyes, sparkling under the distant streetlights, I felt a light flutter in my chest. Suddenly, a voice louder than Ben's echoed through the night. Lau. I looked over Chloe's shoulder and saw Sam a few feet away. He had been my classmate from elementary through middle school, following me around since we were knee-high, until he was recruited by city number 2 high with the 3rd highest score in the city. Back in middle school, I was the sarcastic one, and he was my hype man. We were known as the most annoying duo. Hearing the voice, Chloe froze and took a half step back, her face partially hidden in the shadows. A flash of annoyance crossed her face. Sam looked at me, about to smile, then frowned. Where's that annoying guy? Isn't he usually attached to your hip? Sam had never gotten along with Ethan. They would bicker whenever they met, though it was mostly one-sided on Sam's part. I didn't mention what happened with Ethan. Instead, I smiled. What are you doing here? He held up a bag of roast duck. Home for winter break. My mom sent me on an errand. I then remembered that his family lived in this neighborhood. He didn't press about Ethan, but instead became very excited. When I heard Northwood took first in the 9-city joint exam, I knew it had to be you. And it was. My man Leo is the best, always number one. I laughed. Sam had always been my biggest fan. It was nice to see that hadn't changed after all this time. Sam suddenly rubbed his neck. Why is it a little cold all of a sudden? I paused. Sam's gaze then followed the source of the chill and landed on Chloe. I was about to introduce them when he took a bounding step forward and clapped Chloe on the shoulder. What a coincidence. Chloe, you're here too. Chloe forced a smile. I was worried she was about to punch him. Sam, however, was oblivious. He pointed at me excitedly. This is the Leo the first tell you about every day. Isn't he just as cool and arrogant as I said? Oh right, I saw your name on the joint exam results too. You transferred to Northwood? Have you two met already? Sam chattered on until his mom called and summoned him away. Before he left, he waved at us. I'll hit you guys up for dinner next time. After Sam left, I crossed my arms and looked at Chloe. Okay, what's the story? I knew Chloe had transferred to our school suddenly. She just happened to be assigned the seat in front of me for the placement test, shamelessly peeked at my answers, and even had the nerve to tap on my desk during the math exam to ask for them outright. That's why I had been so convinced she was a slacker. The way she copied answers was so focused, so professional. Chloe smiled. Back then, my parents were fighting about a divorce, and I was sick of it. My mom's hometown is here, and Northwood is her alma mater, so I transferred here to get away from them. Who knew that during the placement test, I'd see your name taped to the desk behind me? Leo. Do you know how long I've been hearing that name? A year. Sam and I were desk mates at City Number 2, both in the physics competition class. Every day, besides doing physics problems, all he did was praise you. I kept wondering what kind of person could be hyped up to be a living god. At first, I just wanted to see your face, so I kept looking back at you because I'd seen your graduation photo at Sam's place. It was the same face, but then I saw the work you were doing. I started to doubt myself. I suspected that kid was lying to me. So I tested you by asking to copy your math answers, and you got everything wrong. You filled out the whole thing, but every answer was wrong. I thought that was interesting. Honestly, I was just going through the motions with the placement test. The principal had already placed me in Class A1. But I wanted to see what you were up to, so I followed you to Class B1. At first, I thought I'd just mess around for a bit, since I wouldn't be staying long anyway. She laughed self-deprecatingly. Who knew? I'd get played myself. I looked at her quietly. It was late December, but Chloe was only wearing a thin sweater, as if she didn't feel the cold. The girl's long eyelashes trembled slightly, the moonlight casting a fan-shaped shadow on her nose. I suddenly started laughing. Chloe, it's nice to meet you. A soft patter of footsteps sounded at just the right moment, as if intentionally for us to hear. Julia was standing in the doorway without a jacket. The wind blew a corner of her white dress, outlining her slender frame. She looked at me and Chloe quietly, her eyes seemingly devoid of emotion. But her voice held a barely perceptible hint of disappointment. Come on in. Everyone's waiting for you. She always seemed like this, quiet and distant. I smiled at her and walked over with Chloe. As I passed Julia, I said softly, Julia, you too. A faint smile touched her lips, then was instantly scattered by the cold wind. The next year and a half flew by. After that day on the field, Ethan never came back to school. I heard he had a breakdown, and his family had him take a leave of absence to recover at home. He was too proud, too rigid, and so he broke. Class A1 never bothered us again. Everyone in our small, square room watched the time pass. And Class B1, once overlooked, became famous, a shining example mentioned by every teacher, the object of envy for every student. All of this change stemmed from that one childish bet. We often marveled at it, but we were also grateful. Until one afternoon, Chloe smiled and told us, Northwood doesn't have a competition team. I'm going to City Number 2 for their competition training camp. I keenly sensed that she said going to, not going back to. Everyone froze as if on pause. No one seemed to know how to face this sudden departure. Chloe hugged every single person. I'm leaving this afternoon. I didn't want to make you all sad. Hey, don't cry. It's ugly. When it was my turn, her arms wrapped tightly around me, her fingertips digging into my waist, her voice a soft whisper. I'll be back. Lau. I didn't come here for you, but you're the reason I stayed. My world was a mess, but meeting you, maybe that was my destiny. Chloe left, but the warmth of her touch on my back lingered. Mr. Davis later told us that Chloe had won first place in the national physics competition and had been offered early admission to Harvard. We all thought she had moved on to the next stage of her journey ahead of us and probably wouldn't be back. I subconsciously touched my back. The warmth was gone. But on another sunny afternoon, amidst the soft rustling of pens on paper, Chloe pushed open the classroom door, just as she had on that summer day last year when she first entered Class B1. The girl was silhouetted against the light, a gentle smile on her face as she leaned against the doorframe. Hello everyone. I'm back. Ben was the first to rush up and give her a bear hug, clinging to her like a koala, refusing to let go. Chloe walked over to me, a faint smile in her eyes. I love physics just like you love math. I went to the competition to chase a dream. She turned to face the rest of the class. But this journey we've all taken together. How could I miss the finale? The sky was particularly clear on the day of the college entrance exams. So close it felt like you could reach out and touch it. Just like our futures within our grasp. After the math exam, I was walking towards the school gate. I overheard a girl from Class A1 hesitantly ask Kyle, who was walking beside her. Kyle, did you think the math test was hard? Kyle had been in the same exam room as me. I had clearly seen him kick his desk leg hard after turning in his paper. He obviously hadn't done well. And it was true. The last two problems on the math test were difficult. He probably hadn't been able to solve the last two parts of the final question. But now, hearing her question, he let out a dismissive laugh. No way. This math test was super easy. Everyone I talked to said they did great. He even feigned surprise. You didn't do well on this? You're screwed. I had heard stories about people who did poorly on a test, but would go around saying how easy it was just to mess with other people's minds. I just never thought I'd meet one of these scumbags in person. Sure enough, the girl had lowered her head, looking utterly dejected. Even people passing by who overheard Kyle's words showed looks of concern. This incompetent, black-hearted piece of trash. I pushed past Kyle and pulled a tissue from my pocket, handing it to the girl. Don't listen to his nonsense. This math test was incredibly hard. I couldn't even solve the last part of the final problem. The girl, who obviously recognized me, looked up in surprise. Really? I nodded. A spark of hope returned to her eyes. That's good, that's good. I only missed one more part than you. I smiled. That's really impressive. Good luck on your next exams. Almost everyone around us had recognized me. That's Leo from Northwood. Even he said it was hard. Leo is a top contender for the state's highest score. I feel so much better now. Kyle, publicly humiliated, rushed up to me and raised his hand. I pointed to the security camera above us. What? You want to hit me? Don't want to take the next exam? He shot me a furious glare, then turned to leave. I called after him. Wait. No one has the right to take away another person's chance to compete fairly. And I will call out your kind of petty, malicious behavior every single time I see it. When the final bell rang, the college entrance exams were over. It was like we had been running a marathon for years, and in the final stretch, we had broken into a 100-meter sprint. The moment we crossed the finish line, there was a sense of empty bewilderment. It was only after the exhaustion, excitement, and anxiety had settled that a small bubble of relief and joy floated to the surface, then filled our chests. The day after the exams, we all came back to school with huge travel backpacks. As we reached the bottom of the stairs, we were showered with a blizzard of white snow. Ben was furious. The party can't start without me. He threw down his bag and charged up the stairs. The sunset that day was beautiful. We watched our long, stretched out shadows. A single neat line. That night, We all headed for the great outdoors. We had planned it long ago. After the exams, the whole class would go on a trip together, to see mountains and lakes, birds and fish, to see the vast world outside the classroom. It was perfect. Not a single person was missing. As for our scores, our class felt that we had done our best, the rest was up to fate. No one even tried to estimate their scores. Mr. Davis called me, Chloe, and Julia in rotation, until all three of us turned off our phones. Only Ben gave us daily updates. That kid from city number 2 estimated his raw score is 717. Mr. D says that's the highest estimate so far. He might be the top scorer. He's going crazy. He called you three his rebellious children and told you to at least give him an estimate. I put on my swim cap and jumped into the water. Nope. Julia simply ignored him. Chloe, lounging on a deck chair, lowered her sunglasses and flashed a wide, toothy grin. Thanks for the offer, but I decline. On the afternoon the scores were released, we had just gotten back to the city. Chloe's dad, with a wave of his hand, had booked out an entire internet cafe for us to check our scores. The place was packed and buzzing, even louder than when a student group comes in for a gaming tournament. We were herded like ducks into a row of computers, with a row of parents standing behind us, their eyes gleaming like lasers in the dim light. It was pretty creepy. Mr. Davis stared at his watch, almost without blinking. The moment it hit 4 p.m., he announced, "Class, it's time." A clatter of keyboards filled the air. Ben was the first to find his score. He jumped up. "Oh my God, 687? I got a 687. His mom, standing behind him, was also stunned. Then, smack, she slapped him across the face, leaving him completely bewildered. "Why did you hit me?" His mom clutched her red hand and murmured, "I thought I was dreaming." Other students' scores started coming in. 677. 677. Dave screamed, heartbroken. "I got 681. The gods of literature have blessed me." 669. Even Zach, who had been at the bottom of the class rankings, broke 650. The internet cafe was filled with a chorus of shocked cries. In front of the screens, we laughed and celebrated. Behind us, the parents were secretly wiping away tears. During these 3 tough years, they had probably endured just as much, if not more, than we had. Fortunately, we had lived up to their hopes. At that moment, on my screen, I saw my own score. 724. I was the top scorer in the state for the science track. I was calmer than I expected. The first thought that crossed my mind was, after all this chasing, I wonder if Chloe and Julia will be upset about being just 1 point behind? It was only then that I truly felt it. My 3 years of high school were finally completely over. The miracle of a 100% top-tier university acceptance rate really happened for Class B1. That night, the admissions teams from MIT and Harvard both showed up at my front door. I heard it was the first time in a decade they'd had such a head-to-head confrontation. They traded barbs. Harvard said MIT was too corporate. MIT said Harvard was too rigid and old-fashioned. MIT mocked Harvard for being a glorified liberal arts college, and Harvard shot back, "And your vocational school is so much better?" I listened with great interest for over an hour. The Harvard admissions officer finally couldn't take it anymore, and made the first offer. "Leo, this year's top humanities scorer already chose Harvard. How about you, the top science scorer, come join her?" I put on a regretful face. "Sorry, Harvard rejected me for early admission. I think I'll go with MIT." The Harvard officer looked shocked. "You'd already decided?" I nodded. "Then why did you let me talk for so long? My mouth is dry," he cried in anguish. I looked at him seriously. I mainly wanted to learn more about my school's main competitor for the next 4 years. I shook the Harvard officer's hand with great solemnity. "Thank you." The Harvard officer's face cracked. He couldn't manage a smile. Meanwhile, the MIT admissions officer behind me was beaming, looking like he was about to pull me into a celebratory dance. When Chloe found out that Julia and I were both going to MIT, she was devastated. "I thought we were brothers for life, ride or die?" I shrugged. "You were just moving too fast. We took different paths." Julia's eyes sparkled with undisguised joy. To each his own. Have fun at a different school. Chloe. Northwood High, a school that had been relatively unknown, had suddenly produced the top 3 science students in the state. The impact was like a nuclear bomb. We were all over the media, becoming a benchmark for thousands of students, a reference point for thousands of parents to motivate their children. When Northwood invited me back to give a speech to the next year's students, I thought I was there as the state's top scorer. But I was surprised to see 44 other familiar faces by the side of the stage. The old principal stood at the podium, proud and gratified. This time, we have invited the students of the 2020 graduating Class B1, who created a miracle for us to speak. 2 years ago, most of them were average. Some couldn't even get into a decent university. But today, 2 years later, some of them are going to MIT, some to Harvard, some to Columbia and other top universities. They achieved a 100% acceptance rate to top-tier universities. This is not the miracle of one person, but the glory of a group. This gives every student here hope that the next miracle could happen to any one of us. I watched as the students from B1 went up to speak one by one. The applause always thunderous. I thought, maybe the reforms the old principal talked about had already begun, right at this moment. When I came back to myself, Chloe had just finished her last sentence. No matter how many people tell you that you can't do it, you have to believe that the you who is working hard and fighting is dazzlingly brilliant. And you have to believe that no effort will ever be in vain. She finished speaking, put down her notes, and looked quietly at me by the side of the stage. Her eyes were filled with a million stars. My gaze swept over every person on the stage, and scenes from the past few hundred days flashed before my eyes. When we made the bet with Class A1, Ben would stuff 3 dumplings in his mouth at once just to squeeze out 2 more minutes to memorize a few more words. The first time Dave passed physics, he rushed over and lifted me over his head, almost making me fall flat on my back. Laura, the language arts rep, had an emotional breakdown before the 3rd mock exam, crying uncontrollably, but she quickly wiped away her tears and got back to her practice test. The day before the final exams, Zach had gone to a temple to get good luck charms and solemnly gave one to each of us. They were my comrades in arms for the past 2 years, the ones who had walked with me through that long and arduous journey. And now, we had all finally reaped the true rewards together. My gaze finally settled on Chloe and Julia, standing side by side, separated from me by a wall of people. Those 2 were always so composed and brilliant. In the days when I had given up on myself, they had burst into my world like meteors, but instead of falling, they had gifted me a sky full of stars. To have had these people by my side during my youth, how lucky I was. I gathered my thoughts and walked step by step to the center of the stage, taking the microphone from Chloe, and met the expectant and admiring gazes from below. Hello. I'm Leo. And I am a member of the 2020 graduating Class B1. When I joined Class B1, the people in it were just rejects in the eyes of the school, the teachers, and even their fellow students. But today, we have all become a beacon of glory, every single one of us. So no one can stop us from climbing higher. As long as you keep walking towards your goal, anyone can become the optimal solution. We have climbed over the mountain of the college entrance exams. And the next us is all of you in the audience. Let's meet at the summit and live up to our youth. As I was tossed into the air by the entire Class B1, it really felt like I could reach out and touch that clear blue sky. This year, we were 18, bold and passionate. The future was bright.